On the edge of a forgotten forest where fog clings to the trees like old secrets, there stands a rusted iron gate. Beyond it, a winding path disappears into the mist, swallowed by silence. Most people in the nearby village pretend it doesn't exist. They don't speak of the path, they don't ask where it leads, but late at night when the wind is just right, some say you can hear soft humming coming from the woods, an old lullaby drifting on the cold air. Long ago, they say, there was a place hidden deep among the trees, a building made of pale stone and crooked windows, once used as an asylum. It wasn't on any map, and it was never meant to be found. The patients inside weren't like others. They were kept away for reasons no one dared to explain. And the woman who ran it, the one with the long white dress and skin like candle wax, was known only as the Pale Lady. They say she still walks the halls even now, searching for voices to quiet and dreams to erase. She whispers softly to those who wander too close. Some return, shaking and pale, their memories full of things they cannot explain. Others don't return at all. And tonight, as the full moon rises and the woods breathe with life, someone is about to find that path again. Someone is about to meet the Pale Lady. The village of Elder Hollow was small. Just a handful of houses, a bakery, and an old post office that hadn't delivered a letter in years. People there lived quiet lives. They grew their own food, fixed their own roofs, and rarely welcomed strangers. Life moved slowly, like the fog that rolled in from the woods every evening and curled around the cobblestones like a sleeping cat. 17-year-old Clara Holloway had lived in Elder Hollow all her life. She had never left the village, not even once. Her mother ran the bakery. Her father worked in the sawmill before it shut down. Now he mostly sat by the fireplace reading old books or staring out the window. He used to smile often. He used to sing. But one night many winters ago, something changed. He came home pale, silent, and shaking, and he never went near the forest again. Clara had always been curious about the world, about the past, and especially about the forest. The trees whispered things when the wind passed through them, soft and strange. Her grandmother used to tell her stories about spirits, about the Pale Lady who took care of people no one else would help. She said the asylum was real, but hidden, like a scar beneath the skin of the forest. Most of all, she said, if you ever hear her lullaby, Clara, don't follow it, no matter how sweet it sounds. Clara used to laugh at that, but now, in the soft, ghostly days of late autumn, with her father growing quieter by the day and her grandmother long buried, the lullaby had begun to drift through the trees again. It started one night as she lay in bed, the covers pulled up to her chin. Outside, the wind brushed against the windows like careful fingertips. And then faintly, so faint she thought she imagined it, humming, soft and slow. A tune she didn't know, but that felt oddly familiar. She sat up, held her breath, listened. It faded into silence. The next day she asked the villagers about it. Most of them pretended not to hear her. One old man at the well narrowed his eyes and said, "You don't follow songs that come from the woods, child. Not if you want to stay whole." But Clara couldn't let it go. That night, she stood in her backyard, eyes locked on the forest. The sky above was heavy with stars, and the moon hung low, almost too large, too bright. The humming came again, this time clearer. It seemed to call her name, not with words but with warmth, like a memory, like a dream she'd once forgotten. She took a step forward. Behind her, the wind shifted. Her father's voice, weak and panicked, called from inside the house, "Clara, don't go near the trees." He hadn't spoken with that much fear in years. She stopped. The next morning, Clara went into the attic. Her grandmother's trunk was there, heavy and covered in dust. She had never opened it before. Inside, she found old photos, brittle and yellowed. One showed a building, strange and tall, with narrow windows and ivy crawling up the stone. Ani, the back in faded ink. Patient wing, Winter Asylum, 1924. Beneath the photo was a small piece of paper. A lullaby, handwritten in her grandmother's delicate script. Clara read the lyrics. They matched the tune from the woods. Her hands trembled. That night she made her decision. If the asylum was real, if it had anything to do with her father's silence, her grandmother's warnings, or the lullaby that haunted her dreams, she had to find it. She didn't want to run. She wanted to understand. She packed a bag with a flashlight, her journal, some bread and cheese, and the old photo. She left a note on her pillow and stepped quietly into the night. The village was silent as always. Only the sound of her footsteps and the faint rustle of leaves filled the air. When she reached the forest's edge, the fog was already waiting. Thick, cold, still. The humming began again. Clara took a deep breath and stepped through the trees. The path revealed itself slowly, just a narrow trail of crushed leaves barely visible. The deeper she went, the more the forest closed in, tall and tangled. The trees seemed to lean toward her as if listening, as if remembering her. The humming grew louder, but never sharp, always soft, always gentle, like the voice of someone who didn't want to scare her, but didn't want her to leave either. After walking for what felt like hours, she saw it. The iron gate, rusted and twisted, half open. Beyond it, a path of white stones leading into the thickest part of the forest, and beyond that, rising like a shadow from the earth, was the asylum. It stood crooked, covered in vines, windows black as ink. The air around it felt heavy, not with fear, but with something else. Something deeper. Grief. Loneliness. Memory. Clara stepped forward, and the gate creaked shut behind her. Clara stood still in front of the iron gate for a moment, her breath forming small clouds in the cold air. The asylum before her looked like it had been asleep for 100 years. Its tall stone walls were cracked, its windows broken in places, and the vines growing along its sides swayed as if touched by unseen hands. She stepped onto the white stone path. It was strangely clean, like someone had swept it recently, even though no one was supposed to be here. Her flashlight flickered, then steadied. She kept walking. Each step closer to the asylum made her chest feel tighter, not with fear exactly, but with a strange kind of pressure, like she was being watched, judged. The front doors were wooden, heavy, and carved with strange symbols, circles, eyes, and lines that didn't make sense. She ran her fingers over them. The wood was cold, almost like metal. She pushed the doors open slowly. They creaked, groaned, and gave way. Inside, it was dark. The flashlight beam cut through the dust in the air, showing broken furniture, old wheelchairs, and torn curtains swaying in still air. The walls were pale gray, almost white, like the color of ash. Paint peeled in long strips, revealing words, scratched into the surface. She sings to me, "Don't sleep. The pale lady is kind." Clara shivered. She walked deeper into the entrance hall. A reception desk sat crookedly to the left, and behind it, a row of patient files were scattered across the floor. She picked one up. The name was smudged, but the date read March 3rd, 1926. A photo was clipped inside, a young girl with wide eyes and a thin face. The note below it read, "Hears the humming, smiles in her sleep, refuses to wake." Clara put the file down. Far off, From deep within the building, the humming began again. This time it wasn't outside. It was inside. She turned slowly, her flashlight sweeping across the room. Shadows moved slightly. The light caught something at the far end of the hallway, a figure standing still. It was only for a second, and then it was gone. Clara's heart began to pound. She wasn't alone. Still, she didn't turn back. She walked through the corridor, passing old patient rooms. Some doors were open, others sealed shut with chains and heavy locks. She peeked into one open room. The bed was made. A doll sat neatly. On the pillow, its button eyes staring back at her. The walls had drawings, simple, childlike pictures. All of them showed the same shape, a tall woman with long arms and pale skin. No face, only emptiness where the eyes should be. Clara stepped back and shut the door gently. She passed a broken mirror in the hallway. Her reflection stared back at her, but for a moment, she thought she saw someone else standing behind her. When she turned, no one was there. Then she noticed something strange. Every door she passed after that had the same thing scratched onto it, a small symbol, an eye with no pupil. The same symbol is carved on the front doors. The humming grew louder. Clara followed it down a staircase, its steps creaking under her weight. She reached a hallway colder than the rest. The air smelled different, damp, like mold and old metal. On the walls were faded photographs of nurses and patients. One photo caught her attention. It was of a woman in a long white dress, standing in the center of a group. Her skin was ghostly pale. Her face was blurred, either from time or something else. Below the photo, head caretaker, Elise, Marine 1916 to 1931. Clara froze. That name, she had seen it before, in her grandmother's journal, hidden in the attic. Elise Marine, written in a list of names with a single word beside it. Not gone. She turned down the hallway and reached a heavy door marked West Wing, closed. The humming came from behind it. Clara reached for the doorknob. It was warm. With a deep breath, she pushed the door open. Inside, the hallway was lined with old beds and curtains. Empty wheelchairs sat in corners. And standing at the far end, barely visible in the dim light, was a woman. She was tall, dressed in white. Her hair hung in long silver strands. Her skin was pale, so pale it almost glowed. She didn't move. She didn't speak. She just stood there, humming. Clara's voice caught in her throat. She lifted the flashlight. The woman's face was hidden by shadow, and then she took a step forward. Clara stumbled back, her hands shaking. The flashlight flickered again. The woman stopped. She raised one hand slowly and pointed to the left. Clara followed the gesture. There was a door there, smaller than the others. Plain. She looked back, but the pale lady was gone. The hallway was empty. Clara stood frozen. Her skin felt tight, like it didn't fit right anymore. But something made her go to the small door. She opened it. Inside was a room filled with journals, rows and rows stacked on shelves, each one labeled with a patient's name and date. She picked one up. It was her father's name. Inside were drawings, notes, descriptions of dreams. He had been here. As a boy, she found another journal with her grandmother's name. Eliza Holloway. Visitor. Below that, written in neat handwriting, left the asylum unharmed. Warned others. Marked by the pale lady. Will remember. Clara's hands shook. She turned the page and found a single note at the bottom. One day her bloodline will return. The forest will call her. The lullaby will guide her. Suddenly, the temperature in the room dropped. Frost began to form on the shelves. She turned around and there she was, the pale lady. Her face was now visible, smooth and cold, like porcelain. Her eyes were hollow, deep wells of white light. Her lips didn't move, but the humming came louder, wrapping around Clara like a heavy blanket. Clara tried to run, but her legs wouldn't move. She wasn't afraid in the way she expected. Instead, she felt calm, sleepy. The pale lady stepped closer and whispered something. Clara's eyelids grew heavy. But just before she could fall, she heard something else. A voice, soft and desperate. "Clara, wake up." Her father's voice. It cut through the humming like lightning. She gasped, dropped the journal, and stumbled out of the room. The humming stopped. She ran through the halls, up the stairs, past the broken mirror, past the open room with the doll. The building now echoed with a low groan like it was breathing. She reached the front door, but it was gone. Only a solid wall stood where it used to be. Behind her, the pale lady's lullaby began again. But this time, it wasn't soft. It was louder, closer, almost angry, and Clara realized she wasn't just a visitor anymore. The asylum had claimed her. Clara stood frozen where the front door had once been, her hand pressed against the smooth, cold wall. No seams, no cracks, just silence behind her now, then a whisper. Not the humming this time, a whisper right behind her ear. "Stay." She turned quickly, but no one was there. The hallway stretched behind her, darker now, longer. The light from her flashlight grew weaker, like the air itself was swallowing it. Clara's breath shook. She whispered into the darkness, "What do you want from me?" A door creaked open down the corridor. She followed it. What else could she do? Inside, the room was circular. Candlelight flickered on the walls, though she didn't know where it came from. The candles burned low, casting dancing shadows. In the center of the room was an old wooden chair, and on the chair sat a figure. Thin, still, head bowed, hair silver and hanging like threads of fog. The pale lady. But this time, something was different. She wasn't standing. She wasn't glowing. She looked small. As Clara stepped closer, she noticed the woman was weeping. Silent tears rolled down her, pale cheeks vanishing into the air before they touched her skin. Clara didn't speak. She only listened. The pale lady's voice broke the silence. Not a whisper, not a hum. A clear voice now, trembling and full of old pain. "They left me here." Clara stood still. "They said I could help the sick. But they lied." Her voice was soft, childlike almost. "They locked me in the West Wing, said I frightened the children." Clara took a step closer. The pale lady looked up, and Clara saw her fully for the first time. Her eyes were deep pools of white light, but inside them was sadness. Not hatred, not evil. A face like porcelain, cracked at the edges. "They forgot me." The pale lady's voice trembled, but the children never did. Clara's throat felt tight. Something inside her shifted. Pity, fear, wonder. She knelt beside the figure. "Why me?" she asked. "Why call me back?" The pale lady turned her head slowly. "Because you're the last." Clara's heart thumped once hard. "You carry their voices, their dreams, the ones who saw me, the ones who never left." Suddenly the candles blew out. Darkness filled the room, heavy and complete. Then, one by one, small lights began to flicker in the air. Ghostly blue glows, floating like fireflies. Each light formed a face. Children, nurses, patients. They hovered around Clara, watching her with sad, empty eyes. The pale lady rose from her chair. She seemed to grow taller, her figure stretching upward, arms long and reaching, but there was no menace in her movement, only sorrow. They were forgotten, she said, buried by time, left to fade. Clara felt tears sting her eyes. What do you want me to do? The pale lady stepped forward and her cold fingers brushed Clara's forehead. Remember us. Clara saw everything at once. Flashes of the past. The asylum alive and full of voices. Laughter, screams, hope, despair. She saw Elise Marine, young, full of kindness, trying to help children who heard voices and saw shadows. She saw doctors, dismissing her, then locking her away when her touch began to heal them. She saw the children visiting her room, singing songs. She saw drawings of the pale lady lining the halls, not as a monster, but a guardian. But then came silence. Then came the fire. The asylum was sealed. The truth was erased, and Elise was left behind, buried in memory. Clara fell to her knees. She now understood. The pale lady had never been a curse. She was the secret too painful to face. A protector turned prisoner, a guardian made ghost. The humming returned, but now it was beautiful, a lullaby full of longing. Clara closed her eyes. When she opened them, the room was gone. She stood outside again, at the forest's edge, the asylum behind her, quiet and dark. But this time, the gates were open. She turned once more, and in the window above, Elise stood, watching, not smiling, not crying, just at peace. Clara whispered, "I'll remember." The wind carried her words gently, and the pale lady was gone. Clara didn't run. She simply stood there for a while, staring at the dark shape of the asylum behind her. It looked old and silent again. No lights in the windows, no humming in the halls, just bricks and shadows in the past. But something had changed. Inside her chest, the fear had melted into something quieter, something sad, but warm, like a memory of someone you once loved and lost. She turned and began walking back through the forest. The path seemed shorter now, the trees no longer so tall or twisted. The wind was calm. The leaves didn't whisper anymore. Or maybe she was just no longer afraid to listen. As the sun rose beyond the hills, soft gold light poured across the trail. Clara stepped out of the woods and onto the road where her car still waited, just as she'd left it. She looked back once. No trace of the asylum. No broken gate. No overgrown path. Just the trees. The silence. And the secret. Clara opened her car door and sat down. Her hands rested on the steering wheel, but she didn't start the engine right away. She reached into her bag and pulled out the old journal. The leather felt different in her hands now, lighter somehow. She opened to the first page. The words were still there, but now she understood them. Not just the facts, but the feelings, the pain hidden between the lines, the loneliness in Elise's voice, her wish to be remembered not as a monster, but as a healer. Clara made a decision. She would write it all down, everything she saw, everything she heard. Not just the ghost stories, not just the fear, but the truth. The pale lady wasn't a nightmare. She was a warning, a whisper from the past begging not to be erased. Clara drove back to town slowly. The road felt peaceful. The sky opened wide and clear above her. No shadows followed her. No sounds crept behind. She had walked through a place forgotten by time and come out changed. At home, she poured a cup of tea and sat by her window, the journal open in her lap. She wrote quietly, page after page, letting the story breathe again. Sometimes, she thought she heard the humming in the distance, soft and far away, but it no longer scared her. It was a lullaby now, a voice saying, "Thank you." And whenever she passed the old children's hospital downtown, the one being turned into a museum, she always left a flower at the gate, a white one, like the pale lady's dress. Sometimes, late at night when the world is quiet, Clara still hums that strange, gentle tune, not because she's haunted, but because some echoes and were too kind to forget.